How have the ultra-wealthy created a separate economic reality? They leverage systemic advantages like buy, borrow, die tax avoidance, monopoly power, and the Cantillon effect to amass fortunes that destabilize society. But what does this unprecedented concentration of power truly mean for the future of democracy?
Have you ever felt that the rules of money, the very grammar of how wealth operates, seem fundamentally different for the ultra-rich compared to, everyone else? What if the richest people aren't just wealthier, but they're actually operating in an entirely different economic reality, one that feels almost, gravity-defying?
That's a really good way to put it. It's like the basic physics of finance just bend for them.
Exactly. And we're talking about an economic landscape where familiar concepts like, say, income and tax, they just behave very differently at the top.
Completely differently.
So let's jump right into the numbers because they truly paint a picture of this shift. I mean, our sources today reveal statistics that are, well, nothing short of astonishing.
They really are something else.
Okay, get this. 4 individuals, right? Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Sundar Pichai of Google, and Elon Musk of Tesla collectively, they command a fortune that has now surged past $700 billion.
$700 billion. It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
It really is. And the very term centibillionaire, someone with a net worth over $100 billion that was barely even a concept a decade ago, sounds almost mythical, right?
Like something in a science fiction.
Yet today, there are 15 such individuals. 15, up from just 6 last year.
The acceleration is just incredible.
And to put that in perspective, think back to 1987. Financial analysts back then, they struggled to find even 2 people on the planet with 28 billion, adjusted for inflation.
Right. That was the peak then.
And that same sum today, it wouldn't even get you a spot in the top 50 wealthiest. Not even close.
Wow.
As one of our sources really aptly describes it, this isn't just a large number, it's a peculiar vertigo, a sense of standing at the edge of a mathematical abyss.
Yeah, that quote really captures it. Because these aren't just abstract figures on a spreadsheet, are they?
Not at all.
They signify a brutal narrative of acceleration. It's a fundamental shift in the nature of economic power itself. And our mission today, in this deep dive, is to go far beyond just recounting these mind-boggling numbers.
Wait, we need the why.
Exactly. We're here to explore the invisible blueprints, the ghost logic, basically, the hidden structural forces that allow for such extreme wealth accumulation.
Okay.
We'll trace the deep structural shifts, the intricate legal frameworks, and the powerful narratives that underpin it all.
So, getting behind the curtain.
Pretty much. Our aim is to demystify these incredibly complex financial concepts, break them down into easily graspable insights so you can truly understand what strange new world has been built to make such unprecedented wealth possible for, a select few.
And to guide us through this intricate landscape, we're drawing from some truly insightful sources. We've got these in-depth analyses, including fascinating excerpts from a foundational piece called The Invisible Architecture of Extreme Wealth.
Which is excellent.
Yeah, and it's complemented by the clear and compelling insights from the YouTube channel Long, which really helps us dissect these intricate systems in a way that's honestly incredibly easy to follow and deeply understandable.
Yeah, Long does a great job of making complex stuff accessible.
Totally. So, why does all of this matter to you right now as you listen? Why do houses cost what they cost in your neighborhood?
Good question.
Why do a handful of names, these very centibillionaires, exert such enormous influence, shaping entire markets, dominating news cycles, even influencing our daily digital interactions?
Their reach is everywhere.
And why do policies, often designed maybe to stabilize a shaky economy, frequently seem to result in a windfall for those already at the very top, leaving so many others feeling like they're just running in place?
It's a pattern, isn't it?
It really feels like it. So we're going to uncover why these questions might lodge in your mind and what the answers mean for our shared reality, our collective future, and maybe the very fabric of society.
It really gets to the core of things.
Okay, let's unpack this first big idea. When we talk about the sheer scale of modern fortunes, it's crucial to understand. It's not just that these individuals possess more money.
Right. It's not just quantity.
Exactly. It's that the very nature of that more is of an entirely different order. It's an unprecedented scale that kind of defies our traditional, everyday understanding of wealth. Imagine trying to compare like the local hill you hike on weekends to Mount Everest.
Okay.
Both are elevations, sure, but one exists on a completely different plane of existence, right?
Yeah.
A scale that just redefines what a mountain can even be.
That's a great analogy. It really captures the qualitative difference.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the core thesis emerging from our sources is this. Wealth today operates under a completely different set of rules than labor does.
Okay. Different rules.
Different rules entirely. And these rules, crucially, they compound exponentially.
Yeah.
We often intuitively think of wealth as something tangible, right? Something earned through effort, subject to the same physical laws as everything else.
Like getting a paycheck for doing a job.
Exactly. We imagine work, production, financial reward. It's all a relatively linear equation in our minds. But the individuals at the apex of this new economic pyramid, they are operating in many ways outside that traditional equation. And this isn't just some accounting curiosity. It's a profoundly human story. It's about the distribution of power, the capture of attention, and what our society ultimately deems legitimate reward.
Right.
All playing out within a machine that, whether intentionally or not, carries immense moral consequences for everyone.
Okay, so how does that difference actually play out, like day to day?
Well, to truly grasp the stark difference in these economic realities, let's try a vivid thought experiment. This comes straight from our sources. Imagine two contrasting mornings.
Okay.
On the first morning, school teacher wakes up. She immediately checks her email for school updates, meticulously grinds her coffee, maybe sighs as she reviews an unexpectedly high rent bill. Fairy. She carefully budgets her grocery list for the week and then signs off on her childcare expenses. Her financial life is measured in the ebb and flow of, say, bi-weekly paychecks and outgoing bills.
Constant juggling.
It's a constant, active exchange of her labor for wages with a clear, finite limit to her earnings. It requires constant effort.
Got it. And the second morning?
Now, consider the second morning. A billionaire wakes up. He glances at his market alerts, which show the value of a company he founded, or maybe a significant investment, rising by tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars.
While he slept?
All while he simply slept. His financial reality is measured in ever-increasing valuations and leverage, in assets appreciating passively, without any direct day-to-day effort from him.
Wow.
What's truly striking here is that these two mornings are measured in entirely different currencies of time, effort, and risk.
Completely different.
One is about that active linear exchange. The other is about passive exponential growth.
That's a really powerful contrast, isn't it? So what does this all mean for us? Why do we as a society just sort of accept that such wildly divergent economic realities can exist side by side, seemingly governed by different laws of physics?
That's the million-dollar question. Or maybe the billion-dollar question now.
Right. Our sources argue that the answer, at its core, begins with a seemingly simple concept: ownership.
Ownership. But it's not simple anymore.
No. Because ownership in today's highly financialized world has incredibly complex contours. It's not just about owning, say, a factory, which implies actively managing workers, raw materials, complex supply chains.
Right, the traditional industrial model.
Yeah. In modern capitalism, ownership often manifests as owning financial instruments, think shares, bonds, options, or vast tracts of real estate.
Things that represent claims on future earnings.
Exactly. They grant claims on future earnings without necessarily requiring the friction of producing more tangible value in the way most people imagine. It's a system where money effectively makes more money simply because it's already money.
Which sounds almost tautological, but it's profoundly true in practice.
That, you see, is the first blunt yet profound mechanism we're dissecting today. Okay, let's really dive deep into this next mechanism then. Prepare for something that might sound almost too perfectly engineered, too elegantly exploitative maybe, to be true.
Okay, I'm braced.
Imagine a perfectly legal system that effectively dissolves the concept of income tax for the ultra-wealthy, allowing their fortunes to grow almost untouched by the taxman.
Sounds like magic.
It kind of does. Our sources call it buy, borrow, die, and it's a truly remarkable, almost magical financial strategy in its simplicity and its effectiveness.
And what's truly compelling here is how systematically this strategy leverages the existing financial and legal architecture. It creates what amounts to a perpetual wealth machine.
A perpetual wealth machine, okay.
Let's break down these three interconnected components, because grasping each one is absolutely key to understanding the ghost logic at play here.
All right, let's do it. Buy, borrow, die. Step one.
Buy.
Okay, first, buy. The ultra-wealthy rarely hold their immense fortunes in traditional bank accounts, right? where interest earned would be immediately subject to income tax.
Right, like the rest of us.
Instead, their wealth is predominantly held in appreciating assets. Think of vast portfolios of stocks, maybe in their own companies or other corporations, sprawling real estate empires, valuable art collections, or even entire private businesses.
Assets that grow in value.
Exactly. These assets grow in value, often astronomically over time. However, and this is crucial, this growth, what we call unrealized gains, is not considered taxable income until the asset is actually sold.
Oh. So as long as they hold on to it.
As long as they hold it, the wealth compounds, it swells, it grows year after year, sometimes by billions, but it remains entirely untaxed. It just exists as potential, a whisper on a ledger, as one source put it.
Oh, whisper on a ledger. Wow.
It's the financial equivalent of a perpetual motion machine in its ability to accumulate wealth without triggering any tax obligations. It just balloons into ever larger sums.
Okay, so that's buy. What's next? Borrow.
Second, borrow. Here's where it gets truly ingenious. Instead of selling these ever-appreciating assets and incurring hefty capital gains taxes.
Which would trigger the tax.
Exactly. They simply borrow against them. Banks are incredibly eager to offer loans, often in the millions, hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars, at infinitesimally low interest rates.
Because the collateral's so good.
Because the collateral, those appreciating assets, is rock solid and growing. Now, this is the crucial part. The money they borrow is legally classified as debt, not income.
Debt, not income.
And debt, by its very definition, is not taxed.
Right.
So with this untaxed borrowed cash, they finance lives of unimaginable luxury, think mega yachts that span football fields, private jets, crisscrossing continents, sprawling Hawaiian islands.
Or even political influence.
Or even immense political influence through donations and lobbying. And as their underlying assets continue to appreciate further, their collateral base grows.
Allowing them to borrow even more.
Precisely. It creates this self-reinforcing spiral of leverage ascending into the financial heavens. This isn't just some clever loophole. It's a core design feature of our financial system that essentially turns their wealth into a tax-free ATM.
A tax-free ATM based on appreciating assets. Okay, that's something. And the final step, die.
And then the final, undeniably brilliant stroke, die. Upon the death of the wealthy individual, these assets, which have now vastly swollen in value and have remained largely untaxed through their appreciation.
Right, all that growth.
Passed to their heirs. Now, while inheritance tax theoretically exists, our sources explain that a legion of meticulously organized lawyers and accountants has typically already constructed intricate networks of trusts, foundations, and offshore holding companies.
Legal phantoms, basically.
Essentially legal phantoms, yeah.
Specifically designed to spirit this immense wealth across generations, almost entirely untouched by inheritance taxes.
So the taxman barely gets a look in. Barely. The debts incurred through borrowing are settled by the estate, often using just a small portion of the now vastly larger assets. And the untaxed growth from the initial assets simply continues its dynastic journey with the next generation.
And the cycle begins anew.
This cycle then begins anew, with the fortune and all its untaxed growth completely preserved and ready to compound further.
Can you give us an example of someone actually doing this?
Sure. To give you a concrete example, our sources point to Larry Ellison of Oracle. He has famously leveraged his shares to finance an almost unimaginable lifestyle.
Like what?
Well, it includes things like a $270 million yacht, an $80 million villa, and the purchase of an entire $30 million Hawaiian island.
An entire island.
An entire island.
Yep.
And he enjoys these luxuries, all while paying an effective tax rate that would, frankly, make a salaried school teacher diligently paying taxes on every single paycheck weep in frustration.
Yeah, you can see why.
This isn't just about avoiding taxes. It's about a complete redefinition of how immense wealth interacts with and largely bypasses the traditional tax system designed for earned income.
And if that example doesn't vividly illustrate the stark contrast, our sources reveal this incredibly potent data point that truly drives the point home.
Which one is that?
While the average person in many countries pays anywhere from, 20%, 30%, maybe even 40% of their hard-earned labor income in taxes.
Depending on the bracket, yeah.
The 25 wealthiest Americans have been found to pay a true effective tax rate of just 3.4%.
3.4%.
Let that number sink in for a moment. 3.4%. It's not a typo.
That's staggering. It really is. And this is why, as our sources argue, it ceases to be a mere loophole and truly becomes the very design of the system itself.
It's built this way.
It's a mechanism so perfectly engineered for their benefit that they are quite literally playing a different game entirely. On a financial field where the very force of fiscal gravity has been suspended just for them, it represents the escape velocity of capital, where wealth, once accumulated beyond a certain threshold, appears to become self-perpetuating and largely immune to the rules that govern the rest of us.
But that raises a crucial question. Where does all the money they borrow come from?
Yeah.
And what perpetually fuels the endless appreciation of their assets in the first place, allowing this buy, borrow, die strategy to work its magic?
Good question. That leads perfectly into the next piece.
This leads us to another hidden mechanism, right? A spectral, almost invisible force that haunts modern economies. What's known as the Cantillon effect.
The ghost in the machine.
Can you explain this simply for us? Our sources describe it as when new money enters the economy, it doesn't spread evenly. It disproportionately benefits those closest to the spigot.
Exactly.
And that, it turns out, has profound and often unseen implications for all of us.
Yeah, the Cantillon effect, it was first observed by this astute 18th century economist, Richard Cantillon. And it describes a simple yet devastating truth that remains profoundly relevant today. When new money is injected into an economy, it is not distributed uniformly. It doesn't fall like gentle rain equally on every field, enriching everyone simultaneously.
Doesn't sound fair.
No. Instead, it's pumped in at specific points, and it disproportionately benefits those who are closest to that point of injection, those who are first in line to receive and deploy it.
And in our world, who's at the spigot?
In our modern economy, that primary spigot is unequivocally the central bank.
Okay, the Fed, the ECB, Bank of England.
Precisely. Consider moments of significant economic crisis. Think back vividly to the 2008 global financial meltdown or the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, huge interventions.
During these periods, governments and central banks inject trillions of dollars into the economy, often creating this new money literally out of thin air. Quantitative easing, stimulus packages. But here's the critical distinction. This new money isn't first given directly to small business owners struggling to stay afloat or to working families trying to pay their rent.
Where does it go first?
Instead, it's injected directly into financial markets. It flows primarily to large banks, institutional investors, and major corporations.
The big players?
Big players. These entities, suddenly flush with fresh, cheaply acquired capital, immediately use it to buy assets, stocks, bonds, high-end real estate, even entire companies. Basically anything with a yield or potential for appreciation. This, you see, is the powerful first wave of the Cantillon effect.
Okay, so they get the money first, they buy assets. What happens then?
Its initial surge of new money flowing into financial markets causes asset prices to soar. It often creates significant inflation just in those assets.
Right, supply and demand for stocks, real estate.
Exactly. This directly and overwhelmingly benefits the already wealthy asset owners, whose net worth sees a dramatic, often passive increase. The stock market, as we've observed time and again, can seemingly detach from the underlying struggles of the real economy.
Yeah, we definitely saw that during COVID. Stocks up, Main Street struggling.
Precisely. Climbing to record heights, even when Main Street is suffering. Only much later does this money slowly trickle down to the general population, perhaps through a stimulus check, slightly higher wages, or government programs.
But it's too late by then.
But by then, it's often too late. The ghost of the Cantillon effect has already passed through, as our sources explain. Asset prices and the cost of basic goods, things like houses, cars, education, even groceries, have already been significantly bid up by that initial wave of new money.
So the money people eventually get buys less?
Exactly. The average person receives money whose purchasing power has already been substantially eroded. They are left, as our sources powerfully describe it, running in place, their wages perpetually chasing prices that were set by a game they weren't invited to play.
Wow, running in place. That's evocative. Is there an analogy for this?
Yeah. To make this even clearer, our sources offer a truly vivid analogy. Imagine a tide that rises quickly at the shore. It first soaks the immediate rocks, right? Then the damp sand closer to the water. And only much, much later does it reach the drier earth further from the waterline. The people positioned right at the waterline, think of them as the owners of liquid assets. They feel the tide first, immediately, and they get to pick which precious pebbles and shells to claim.
While the water is still low for everyone else.
Exactly. Those who are further inland only receive the later diluted warmth of that rising tide. The Cantillon effect is like a constant invisible tide. It's a silent, ongoing transfer of wealth from the wage earner to the asset owner. It happens constantly, often unnoticed, shaping the economic landscape around us.
Okay, that makes sense. The invisible tide.
And this powerful, yet often unseen mechanism helps explain a profound and deeply unsettling paradox we've witnessed recently.
Which is?
During the COVID-19 pandemic, a crisis that tragically shuttered countless businesses, cost millions their jobs, caused immense economic hardship for vast segments of the population.
A terrible time for so many.
The collective wealth of the world's billionaires increased by trillions of dollars.
Trillions, while people were losing everything.
Trillions. For them, the economic medicine, the quantitative easing, the massive fiscal stimulus designed to save the economy acted like a potent steroid, propelling their fortunes higher.
Right.
For countless others, however, it felt more like a slow-acting poison, seeing their savings dwindle and costs rise. It's a feature, not a bug, of a system primarily designed to protect and inflate capital, often at the expense of labor.
And it's this chilling clarity that former trader Gary Stevenson highlights when he cuts through the noise, right? He says, "You are not making society richer by creating more money. You are simply changing who has claim to the existing resources."
That quote just hits hard, doesn't it?
It really brings home the zero-sum feeling many people have, the sense that someone else's gain comes directly at their expense. It makes you realize that the pie isn't necessarily getting bigger for everyone, but simply being resliced.
In a way that benefits those closest to the oven.
Now, here's where it gets truly fascinating and perhaps even more insidious. Because it's not just about what's not taxed, or how new money flows preferentially.
There's more.
It's also about how the very rules of the game, the fundamental legal architecture, and the strategic decisions made by corporations themselves are meticulously structured to favor wealth accumulation.
Right. It's an active design, not merely a passive outcome.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, this is an absolutely critical point that often goes overlooked. Consider the legal architecture of our tax system. It often deliberately separates income from capital in ways that significantly favor wealth.
How so?
Capital gains, which are the profits from the appreciation of assets, right?
Right.
They're often taxed at considerably lower rates than wages, which are earned through active labor.
Okay. Lower tax rate for investment gains than for work income.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the wealthy have access to sophisticated legal instruments. Profits can be rolled over into new investments, deferred indefinitely, or moved into complex trusts and foundations, sheltering them from immediate taxation.
The things we talked about with buy, borrow, die.
Exactly. These structures, maintained by a legion of lawyers and accountants, are designed to spirit wealth across generations, almost entirely untouched by inheritance taxes.
So the system itself advantages capital.
The cumulative effect is profound. Wealth compounds not just because assets grow in value, but because that growth is more lightly visited by the fiscal hand that funds public goods, the very taxes that pay for our roads, schools, and hospitals. This isn't an accident. It's a direct consequence of decades of deliberate policy design and, frankly, legislative capture.
Okay, so the tax system is one part. What about corporate decisions?
Right. Beyond the tax system, we also see the impact in corporate decisions, particularly the contemporary tendency for corporations to engage in massive share buybacks.
Ah, yes, buybacks. We hear a lot about those.
Instead of prioritizing investments in worker productivity, expanding their capital infrastructure, or funding crucial research and development.
Things that might create more jobs or better products.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Many publicly traded companies allocate enormous resources to buying back their own stock from the open market.
Why do they do that? What's the effect?
Well, share buybacks have a concentrating effect. They reduce the number of outstanding shares, which almost always artificially lifts the stock price.
Okay, fewer shares means each remaining share is worth more, driving up the price.
Precisely. This, in turn, handsomely rewards executives whose compensation packages are heavily tied to share performance, as well as existing shareholders.
So good for executives and existing owners.
Right. But the consequence is a reduction in the labor share of income relative to capital share, further exacerbating the gap between asset owners and wage earners.
So money that could go to wages or investment goes to boosting the stock price instead.
It diverts resources that could be used for broad-based prosperity directly into the pockets of the already wealthy.
And that, I think, raises a really important ethical question for us all to consider. Are share buybacks illegal?
No, not currently, in most places.
No, they're perfectly legal. But are they morally neutral? That is the profound question, isn't it?
It really is.
When a powerful corporation consistently chooses massive share buybacks over, say, investing in comprehensive worker training programs or offering genuinely higher wages for their employees or dedicating more resources to innovation that could create more widespread employment. What does that choice fundamentally say about the distribution of responsibility and reward within our society? Is allocating profit primarily to owners always a neutral act of maximizing value? Or is it more often a political choice disguised as economic efficiency?
That's a really sharp way to frame it, because ultimately it's crucial to understand that none of these points to the advantageous tax system for capital, the Cantillon effect, or the prevalence of corporate buybacks operates in isolation.
They all work together.
They interact, they stack, they reinforce each other, and together they profoundly transform the ecology of possibility for extreme wealth accumulation.
Right.
Ownership today gains value not merely because assets become intrinsically worth more, but because that increase in value instantaneously becomes collateral for new leverage.
The borrowing part again.
You can borrow against those appreciated holdings, you avoid selling them and thus defer or avoid realization taxes, and you spend that borrowed loan as if it were untaxed income. This is the buy, borrow, defer cycle we've discussed. A powerful, self-perpetuating logic that is almost entirely inaccessible to the vast majority of wage earners, making it an incredibly potent engine for generating and perpetuating invisible wealth.
Okay, so this concentration of abstract financial power, it isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet, right? It's mirrored and indeed magnified by a dangerous concentration of very real-world power.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the rise of unchecked monopoly, and our sources suggest that what we're witnessing today is far closer to a kind of digital feudalism than it is to traditional competitive capitalism.
Digital feudalism, that's a stark term, but yeah, it captures something important.
It's a seismic shift in how power operates in our economy.
It really is. We once spoke of industrial titans, like, oil barons and railroad tycoons. Their power was immense, but often geographically constrained by physical infrastructure.
Right, you needed tracks, pipelines.
Exactly. Today's titans, however, control something far more fundamental and pervasive: the very infrastructure of information, commerce, and social connection itself.
The pipes of the digital world?
Pretty much. They're not merely participants in the market. They are, in effect, the architects, the gatekeepers, and often the sole proprietors of the market itself. This represents a profound and truly alarming shift in economic power dynamics.
Can you give some examples of this control?
Sure. Consider these specific, almost unbelievable examples from our sources. Amazon, through its vast ecosystem, controls over 80% of all online commerce in significant parts of Europe.
80%. Wow.
Google commands over 90% of the world's search queries, making it the de facto gateway to information for billions.
The lens through which we see the web.
And Meta, through a series of strategic acquisitions, now owns 4 of the 5 largest social media platforms globally, effectively controlling vast swaths of our digital public square.
So they own the places we talk and shop and search.
This isn't mere market dominance. It's, as our sources so aptly put it, a kind of gravitational power. It bends the world, our choices, and our opportunities around it.
Gravitational power. Explain that.
Well, a true monopolist possesses the extraordinary power to dictate terms to its suppliers.
Yeah.
Right? To depress wages for its workers who have few other employment options.
Because where else are they going to go?
Exactly. And to ruthlessly extinguish any potential competitor before it can even grow into a threat. This creates what's been termed a kill zone.
A kill zone.
Yeah, an environment where genuine innovation from smaller players just withers because they cannot compete against the monopolist's sheer scale and unchecked power.
Stifles competition.
But more profoundly, this power extends far beyond economics. It shapes the very flow of information we consume, influencing what we see, what we believe, and ultimately how we interact with one another and perceive the world.
So it affects our democracy, our society?
It has the power to define the very boundaries of our digital reality, affecting our civic discourse and social fabric. It's no coincidence that a staggering 18% of all billionaire wealth today is derived from industries dominated by these new monopolies.
18% just from monopolies?
The surest path to extreme wealth, it seems, isn't just to build a better mousetrap, but to own the entire mousetrap industry, the patent office, and maybe even the regulatory agencies that oversee it.
So the system that's supposed to prevent this isn't working. Antitrust laws.
Well, the truly concerning aspect is that the legal frameworks designed to prevent such a dangerous concentration of power, the antitrust laws conceived for a bygone industrial era, have proven, well, utterly impotent against these new leviathans.
Lack of it.
The loopholes are vast, the lobbying budgets of these corporations are endless, and the very nature of their digital power is too fluid, too complex, too global for 20th century regulations to effectively grasp or constrain.
And they just operate beyond the old rules.
And so their dominance grows, largely unchecked, leading to a kind of private, unaccountable sovereignty that operates above and beyond traditional democratic oversight.
That's a profound thought. So what does it truly mean for our democracies when, for instance, three men, perhaps Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos, individually hold more financial and informational power than, let's say, 170 million of their fellow citizens combined?
Yeah.
That's not just an economic imbalance. That's a question that cuts directly to the very heart of the social contract and the concept of equitable power in a democratic society.
It absolutely does. It challenges the fundamental premise of one person, one vote, when some voices have such disproportionate megaphones.
And what does all of this, the hidden financial mechanisms, the unchecked monopolies, mean for the deeply ingrained stories societies tell themselves about merit, fairness, and ultimately what constitutes legitimate reward?
Right, because power isn't just about control. It's also profoundly about shaping the narrative that justifies and legitimizes that control.
The story we believe.
Exactly. For many decades, especially in Western societies, the dominant and incredibly powerful narrative has been the self-made story.
The rags to riches tale.
The billionaire was cast as the pioneer, the visionary risk-taker, the relentless builder, the brilliant innovator. This narrative was incredibly compelling because it offered a way to reconcile extreme wealth inequality with a perceived moral order. The rich, we were told, earned it through their extraordinary efforts and ingenuity. It provided a reassuring explanation for vast disparities, one that affirmed the justice and fairness of the overall system.
But that story is fraying.
However, this comforting story begins to lose its plausibility, even its very moral force, when we look closely at the data and the mechanisms we've discussed today.
Like inheritance or buy, borrow, die.
Right. When careful measurement shows that a significant portion of today's extreme wealth is inherited, not earned through direct innovation. When the sophisticated tools of wealth preservation, like the buy, borrow, die strategy, are perfectly legal but opaque, operating in the shadows of public understanding. And when immense market dominance is actively underwritten by public goods, government subsidies, and regulatory inaction, then the dominant narrative begins to fray, exposing uncomfortable truths.
The story doesn't quite fit the facts anymore.
We begin to suspect that meritocracy is sometimes, as our sources suggest, little more than a retroactive justification, a convenient myth that retrofits an ethical explanation to what is, in reality, a structural and inherent advantage, rather than being a true, unvarnished reflection of the system's fairness.
That's a truly powerful and thought-provoking point. So the crucial question becomes, how do we as a society reforge a public story, a narrative that genuinely honors creation, true innovation, and meaningful contribution, without at the same time inadvertently legitimizing exploitation and structural advantage? How do we ensure that genuine progress and groundbreaking new ideas truly benefit the many, the entire social fabric, and not merely consolidate even more power and wealth for the few who already stand at the very pinnacle?
That is the central challenge, I think.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental question for our collective future and for the kind of society we aspire to build.
Okay, so this isn't just a discussion about abstract numbers or complex financial maneuvers. The profound implications of this extreme wealth concentration ripple through and fundamentally alter everyday life for millions of people.
Absolutely. It's not theoretical.
The ever-widening chasm between the super-rich and everyone else is, as our sources describe it, a tectonic fault line running deep beneath our societies, creating tangible, often painful consequences for how we live, interact, and even envision our future.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the renowned investor and historian Ray Dalio, he did this huge study looking at 500 years of empires and economic cycles.
Okay, what did he find?
He identified a clear, recurring pattern. He observed that every major period of social and political upheaval throughout history has been consistently preceded by three distinct conditions.
Three conditions, what are they?
An extreme concentration of wealth and power, high levels of public and private debt, and a deeply polarized and fractured political environment.
Wow. Does that sound disturbingly familiar to our current moment?
It certainly resonates, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For many decades, the powerful myth of the middle class, the aspirational promise of a stable life, achievable through hard work, owning a home, securing a comfortable retirement, sending your kids to college.
The American dream, sort of.
That kind of thing. It served as the social glue for many Western societies. You can watch movies from the 1980s and 90s and see a world where a single working parent could often comfortably support a family and achieve a decent standard of living.
Seems almost quaint now.
Tragically, that world, for a vast many, is now largely a fantasy.
So what happened to the middle class?
For at least a generation now, the middle class has been systematically hollowed out. They've been squeezed relentlessly by stagnant wages that haven't kept pace with inflation.
Right. Costs go up, wages don't.
By exponentially rising costs for essential needs like housing, healthcare, and education, and by the relentless, often brutal logic of a financialized economy that consistently prioritizes and rewards asset ownership over honest labor.
The stuff we've been talking about.
Exactly. What's particularly chilling here is that the major crises of the 21st century, the 2008 global financial crash and the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, didn't create this fundamental fracture.
They just made it worse.
Instead, they acted as powerful accelerants, widening it into a canyon with devastating and frightening speed, pushing many over the edge.
The heartbreaking result, as we are all seeing and feeling in our daily lives, is a society simmering with a quiet desperation, a pervasive sense of betrayal, and a growing, undeniable conviction among a vast majority that the economic game, in truth, is fundamentally rigged against them.
It's a dangerous feeling to have widespread in a society.
It's a feeling that undermines trust and stability at its core.
And this profound discontent and pervasive sense of injustice then feeds directly and inevitably into the political landscape, leading to significant and often volatile consequences.
How so?
When people lose fundamental faith in the fairness of the system, they become increasingly susceptible to the alluring, yet often divisive siren songs of populism, which can emerge from both the left and the right.
Okay, explain that.
The left, often diagnosing the problem as one of unfair distribution, typically demands aggressive redistribution of wealth and resources. The right, conversely, often deflects by focusing on cultural decay, moral panics, or external threats, while simultaneously seeking to preserve existing hierarchies.
Different targets, same anger.
But crucially, both these populist phenomena are, at their core, symptoms of the same underlying disease. A society that has tragically lost its sense of shared purpose, its commitment to equitable progress, and its belief in a common future.
So inequality fuels political division.
And what's truly fascinating and deeply concerning, here is how extreme wealth concentration directly translates into a profound asymmetry in rulemaking.
Asymmetry in rulemaking, meaning
wealthy actors possess vastly more capacity to shape policy, to fund lobbying efforts that push their agendas, and to define the prevailing narratives that ultimately serve their interests.
money talks in politics.
Loudly. This is precisely why democracies are inherently fragile when wealth becomes so incredibly concentrated. When the very rules of the game can be altered subtly or overtly by those who can afford a small army of lawyers working tirelessly in their interest. Then the very idea of democratic remedy phrase. It's not necessarily that the rich are always actively trying to subvert democracy. Sometimes they invest in stability and infrastructure, yes.
What?
But they also consistently and powerfully resist any measures that would genuinely redistribute power, because fundamentally, a redistribution of wealth inherently means a redistribution of influence and control.
They don't want to give up their advantage.
Understandably, from their perspective perhaps, but it creates a huge imbalance.
This then is not merely a debate over specific policy proposals or economic theories. It is the chilling sound of a social contract, the foundational agreement between citizens and their society unraveling before our very ears.
It feels like that sometimes.
When the majority of people come to feel that the allocation of resources, opportunities, and power is fundamentally unjust, the entire system, no matter how robust it seems, begins to lose its legitimacy.
And that, history repeatedly teaches us, has always led to periods of profound instability and unpredictable change.
So, given everything we've explored today, is this current trajectory inevitable? Are we simply adrift on an unchangeable tide, passively watching these forces unfold?
God, I hope not.
Or can thoughtful, decisive policy interventions actually re-anchor the center, rebalance the scales? Or are the conventional answers just tragically inadequate to such a vast systemic problem?
That is, without a doubt, the crucial and most challenging question. And our sources propose several plausible interventions while, candidly acknowledging the significant political and economic challenges they invariably face.
Okay, what kind of interventions are we talking about?
Well, on one hand, there's the call for stronger anti-monopoly enforcement. This aims directly at reducing rent capture.
Rent capture. Explain that again simply.
Simply put, it's the ability of dominant firms to extract excess profits, not primarily through genuine innovation or added value, but just because they hold a commanding, often monopolistic position in the market.
Like the landlord with the only building in town.
It's exactly like that landlord. Reducing this means ensuring companies can't just profit from their sheer dominance, but from genuine innovation and value creation.
Makes sense. What else?
On the other hand, we need comprehensive tax reform, specifically aimed at wealth, rather than just merely income, which we've seen is so easily bypassed.
Taxing the wealth itself, not just the flow of income.
Precisely. This could include significantly higher capital gains rates, the elimination of the step-up in basis on death.
Ah, the inheritance loophole.
Which is that key tax rule where, upon inheritance, the cost of an asset is reset to its value at the time of death, meaning heirs avoid paying capital gains tax on all the appreciation that happened during the deceased's lifetime.
So getting rid of that means the accumulated gains finally get taxed.
Eliminating this would mean that long-term untaxed growth would finally face a tax event when passed on. Other reforms could include a minimum effective corporate taxation, capping executive pay relative to the median worker compensation.
Like a ratio cap.
Yeah, or decisively closing existing share buyback loopholes. We could even explore creating more democratic ownership models, things like worker cooperatives or public benefit mandates, to ensure broader distribution of value.
Okay, those sound like logical steps, but they always face pushback, right?
Oh, absolutely. What's truly illuminating here is that while these solutions seem logical and necessary to many, they are almost invariably met with what our sources dub the lobbyists' chorus of fears.
The lobbyists' chorus. I like that. What do they sing?
We hear arguments that punishing success will disincentivize investment, or that capital will simply flee the country, or that innovation will stagnate.
The standard arguments against higher taxes or more regulation.
Pretty much. It's important to acknowledge that these objections are not always bad faith, and indeed represent economic possibilities that require careful and nuanced consideration.
Sure.
However, these arguments often assume a frictionless mobility for capital that is, in practical reality, frequently illusory.
Meaning capital isn't as easy to move as they say?
For instance, where exactly will a massive manufacturing factory employing thousands of skilled workers suddenly relocate if it's constrained by new regulations? Where will a multi-billion-dollar tech giant with immense specialized infrastructure and a vast skilled workforce suddenly move its entire operation to?
Good point. It's not that simple.
Often the answer is quite simply nowhere. The existing infrastructure, the availability of skilled labor, the proximity to established markets, they matter immensely. As our sources emphasize, capital tends to be more sticky than rhetoric assumes, especially when its power is rooted in control of existing infrastructure and networks.
Okay, so if we're to truly address this, policy cannot merely be about reassigning blame. It has to do more.
Exactly. It must, at its core, fundamentally rewire incentives, creating a new framework for how wealth is generated, distributed, and ultimately shared across society.
Rewire incentives? How?
Well, this means deliberately aligning private gain with the public good. We need to reward firms that genuinely share value with their workers, that invest in their communities, and that prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term financial engineering.
Carrot and stick.
Kind of. Conversely, we need to penalize extractive practices, those that simply siphon off wealth without creating new, genuine value. We must design tax architecture that effectively captures unearned increases in asset values, rather than inadvertently subsidizing speculative gains while penalizing productive labor. And, critically, it means rebuilding democratic capacities so that ordinary citizens and voters can discern and decide on policies free from the overwhelming and unequal cacophony of influence wielded by concentrated wealth. It's about empowering the many, not just the few.
That sounds like a huge task, rebuilding democratic capacity.
It is. Our sources also encourage us to engage in experiments in imagination for what a new, more equitable social contract could look like.
Experiments in imagination, like what?
Yeah. Imagine, for instance, government action proceeding along two parallel tracks simultaneously. Track A would involve aggressive, direct measures to reduce rent-seeking and significantly increase fiscal capacity.
Okay, like higher wealth taxes, tough antitrust.
Exactly. Robustly higher taxes on large wealth transfers, much tougher antitrust enforcement to break up monopolies, and a global minimum tax to prevent capital flight in tax havens.
And Track B.
Simultaneously, Track B would be a robust, proactive public investment program focusing on essential public goods, expanding access to high-quality education, universal health care, genuinely affordable housing, and direct support for small businesses, essentially, the direct capitalism of public goods.
Investing in people and infrastructure.
Right. What's particularly compelling here is how these two tracks could powerfully reinforce each other. A healthier, more equitable democracy, strengthened by the public goods of Track B, would be far better equipped to regulate markets effectively.
Ah, I see the feedback loop.
And those regulated markets, guided by the principles of Track A, would in turn distribute gains more fairly, further bolstering democratic health and legitimacy.
That's an interesting model. Any other experiments?
Another fascinating experiment in imagination involves a social contract pivot, where the ownership of critical digital platforms or natural monopolies like utilities would carry explicit public obligations.
Obligations on big tech or utilities? Like what?
Think about mandatory public dividends, where a portion of profits automatically flows back to the public. Worker representation on corporate boards, giving employees a direct voice in decision-making, or caps on the rents extracted from customers by these dominant platforms.
So making them more accountable to the public they serve.
Exactly. These are not fanciful ideas dreamt up out of thin air. Precedents for such public obligations on private entities exist in utility regulation, in the structure of crown corporations in other countries, and in various civic trusts throughout history.
Right.
The real underlying question then becomes, do we continue to treat markets as purely private domains, solely existing for private profit, or do we recognize them as hybrid spaces with inherent public obligations and a responsibility to the wider society?
That's a fundamental choice, but we must constantly ask ourselves, especially when we hear that familiar lobbyist chorus of counter-arguments about the cost of these interventions. Who truly pays for inaction? Who bears the burden when housing becomes catastrophically unaffordable, forcing families into impossible choices, breaking apart communities?
Yeah.
Who pays when public health systems decline because vital services are chronically underfunded? Who pays when political discourse frays into extreme polarization, eroding trust in our most fundamental institutions and even in each other?
These are profoundly important questions because the true costs of inaction are not just abstract numbers or distant concerns. As our sources powerfully highlight, they are born unevenly and often invisibly, impacting the most vulnerable first and hardest. They compound like deferred maintenance until sudden collapse reveals the cheapness of our prior repairs.
Deferred maintenance.
That's
a good analogy.
The bill, you see, always comes due eventually, and far too often, it's the most marginalized and least powerful who pay the highest, most devastating price, while those who benefited from the inaction remain shielded.
So, as our deep dive draws to a close, we're left not just with economic figures and policy debates, but with a question that feels, well, less economic and more profoundly existential. What kind of polity, what kind of society do we truly want to build, nurture, and ultimately live in?
This is precisely where the philosophical dimensions of extreme wealth come into sharp and unavoidable focus.
Is extreme wealth, in and of itself, an affront to the concept of equal moral standing for all citizens?
Does it violate a basic sense of fairness? Philosophers have debated for centuries whether vast inequality is acceptable if it theoretically benefits society as a whole through innovation or trickle-down effects.
Right. The rising tide lifts all boats argument.
Or if it fundamentally corrodes civic equality, undermines democratic legitimacy, and fractures social cohesion. The answer to that question profoundly matters, because it dictates what kinds of reforms we, as a society, even consider permissible, let alone necessary, in pursuit of a just world.
What we think is even possible to change.
Exactly. We also have to ask a deeper question. Why do human beings strive to accumulate wealth far beyond any conceivable material need?
Good question. What's the point after the first billion?
The modern economists often measure utility as if more money always, infinitely increases welfare or happiness. But it's clear that for basic needs, saturation happens. Beyond a certain point, more money buys diminishing returns, offering marginal pleasures, not meaning.
More toys, not necessarily more fulfillment.
The puzzle isn't just how this incredible accumulation occurs, but why our economic and social systems tolerate and, in fact, so powerfully incentivize such vast excesses. If accumulation beyond any reasonable need is indeed morally questionable, can we actively redesign our incentives, our very systems, to genuinely reward contribution and value creation rather than mere extraction?
How would that look?
Could we, for example, implement systems that truly tax speculative holdings or rents generated purely by market control, while simultaneously rewarding forms of wealth creation that genuinely expand capacity, foster widespread well-being, and truly benefit a wider public?
Shift the rewards towards productive activity.
And there's another crucial dimension that profoundly shapes our understanding: the psychological architecture of wealth itself.
The psychology of being super rich.
Yeah. Wealth doesn't merely provide comfort and luxury, it profoundly shapes one's perception of the world and one's place within it. The ultra-wealthy are, by design, often insulated from the everyday realities that shape the lives of most people.
The bubble effect.
They live in private schools, gated communities, access curated media, and outsource the daily vulnerabilities, like job loss, unexpected sickness, or overwhelming debt that fundamentally define risk aversion for the vast majority.
Things most people worry about constantly.
When you are so deeply insulated, protected by layers of financial and social privilege, the world can begin to look like a place where risk is merely a technicality, an abstract problem, rather than a visceral, immediate threat.
Doesn't feel real in the same way.
It doesn't necessarily make the wealthy immoral. It simply makes perspective unequal, leading almost inevitably to the championing of policies that favor resilience for those who already are resilient, perpetuating the cycle of advantage.
And reinforcing their own worldview.
Right.
And it's precisely at the point where that insulation creates such unequal perspectives, where privilege becomes so deeply ingrained and self-reinforcing that the powerful myth of meritocracy grows brittle, begins to crack, especially in societies where genuine social mobility has stagnated for generations.
I want to leave you with a powerful image from our sources. Not a neat, definitive solution, but something profound to hold in your mind as you go about your day.
Okay.
Imagine a city at dawn. In one neighborhood, the first lights flick on in towering skyscrapers. Vast trading floors, opulent executive suites, glass towers reflecting the rising sun, representing immense concentrated wealth.
Right, the financial district maybe.
In another neighborhood, perhaps just across the river, the light is a single, practical bulb glowing over a kitchen table, where someone meticulously balances a household budget, prepares for a long day of work, and quietly cares for a small child.
Everyday life.
Representing the daily struggle and resilience of the majority. Both spaces are, in their own unique ways, necessary for a functioning, vibrant city. Yet the city cannot truly be healthy, truly be just, if the magnificent towers shelter themselves entirely from the fundamental needs and obligations of the neighborhood below.
They need to be connected.
A truly flourishing city, a truly healthy society, must be both vibrant and innovative at the top, and humane, equitable, and sustainable at the bottom. To reach that crucial balance, we must be willing to rewrite some of the fundamental, currently invisible laws of money. We must make our public institutions robust and resilient, so they cannot be slowly bought, subtly influenced, or outright captured by private interests. We must dare to invent new tax designs, new corporate norms, and new ownership arrangements that explicitly recognize the profound social conditions upon which all private success ultimately depends.
Recognizing that success isn't just individual.
Exactly.
So what could you do as a listener armed with this deeper understanding? What are the footprints of this invisible architecture you can now begin to look for in the world around you?
Yeah, what's the takeaway for action?
Start by asking critical, piercing questions. Who truly benefits when new policies are proposed and ultimately passed? Whose voices are amplified, and crucially, whose are systematically silenced or marginalized in our most important public debates? How are our essential public goods, our roads, our schools, our hospitals, our parks actually funded, and by whom?
Be curious, be critical.
You can actively choose to support institutions that aim to expand broader ownership, things like public banking initiatives, democratic cooperative ownership models, or participatory budgeting processes that give citizens a real voice.
Support alternatives.
You can vote for reforms that actively reduce capital's unchecked ability to manipulate public policy and turn it into private gain.
Use your democratic power.
And perhaps most importantly, you can lend your support to narratives, to stories that treat success not as a purely individual, isolated achievement, but as a social product built upon collective effort, shared resources, and public investment.
Change the story. Because ultimately, this deep dive, Brings us to the ultimate defining question of our time. Do you truly want a world where wealth is primarily an instrument of public flourishing, broadly distributed to uplift everyone? Or do you accept a world where it functions primarily as a trophy case for private immortality, for dynastic privilege? That, you see, is the question now at the very heart of our politics, our economics, and our collective future.
It's a fundamental choice.
It is not merely about envy or abstract efficiency. It is about what counts as fair, about what institutions are truly capable of sustaining trust, and about whether we can collectively imagine and build a common life where widespread prosperity is not merely an accident of birth, but the intentional just result of shared endeavor and mutual obligation.
There are no tidy, simplistic conclusions here today, are there? The machine of modern wealth is complex, adaptive, and powerfully fed by deeply ingrained laws, by pervasive stories, and by potent, often unseen incentives.
It's a big, complex system.
Yet, the complexity of this machine, the sheer scale of the challenge, does not in any way equate to inevitability.
That is the absolute key takeaway. Structure can be changed, narratives can be rewritten, and institutions can most certainly be rebuilt. The real question, the truly difficult one, is less whether it can actually be done, and much more whether we will collectively summon the courage and the will to do the hard, often unpopular but profoundly necessary work of redesigning a system that truly distributes power and reward with genuine justice and broad human flourishing in mind.
Will we together choose to build a polity that truly values broad flourishing over private excess and unearned privilege? Or will we simply watch the tide of wealth continue to rise around the same few, while the rest of us, the vast majority, are left to build ever more fragile sandcastles at a rapidly disappearing shoreline?
Stark choice.
We encourage you to keep asking these critical questions and to look for the footprints of influence, the invisible architecture in the world around you every single day.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.